It's very good to be with you guys again. I see you in all the cool places, don't I? We were in Cancun together. Now we're in Winter Haven, California, just outside of Yuma, Arizona. M1 Global USA, the debut on UFC Fight Pass. Pretty cool. I'm very excited about this.
Before we get into the M1 Global stuff, man, I'm kind of curious. How did you get started as a commentator? How did you get into the fight business?
I'm one of those extremely nerdy kids who, and I'm old enough to have been in the era of tape recorders and would sit at 7 and 8 years old and call play-by-play in front of a television set. And I've noticed a common thread. I'm not friends with a lot of play-by-play commentators. I like John Anik a lot, and I can't think of anybody else who's a play-by-play commentator I'm friends with. My friends in the business are either color commentators, athletes, or producers generally. But I've noticed a thread with play-by-play commentators. We're usually people who love sports who aren't very athletic. It's kind of a weird mix. So we're the type of people who really obsess about sports. We know we're never going to be great athletes, even though we do play sports, but we're not that good at it. So we kind of channel that passion into a direction which comes out as a commentator. But being a commentator is a weird business, and I always try to help people who reach out to me in person or on social media. I always try to make myself active. Especially people who are 18, 19, 20 years old who want to get into it. And what I tell them is, even if I turned into my 18-year-old self tomorrow, knowing everything I know now, I don't know that I could have achieved anything that I've achieved quicker, in a more timely fashion. It is a really, really weird business to be a commentator. You have to do good work, but then people have to recognize that good work. And it's very difficult. I know people who are infinitely more talented than me that have never had the level of high-profile gigs that I've had in other sports. And I know some people who I don't think are all that talented who have really phenomenal careers. It's a really unusual business, but I'm someone, I've always loved sports. I've always loved combat sports. I've always loved fighting. As a kid, I would watch Tough Man. I was a huge pro wrestling mark, massive boxing fan. Some of my earliest childhood memories are of actually watching boxing. And I was among the 86,592 households that watched UFC 1 live on November 12th, 1993. As I've said in a lot of interviews, my mom, I was raised by my mom. She was my benefactor on all things pay-per-view, even though we didn't have a lot of money. I'm the son of a public school art teacher. And if it was something I really wanted to watch, like a Mike Tyson fight or an Oscar De La Hoya fight or a WrestleMania, or this crazy thing I saw a poster on called the Ultimate Fighting Championship, which cost $14.95, my mom would do it through telecable of Overland Park, Kansas. And I'm making the reference from a fellow Kansan, or at least a one-time Kansan over here. But my mom would pay for that, and she paid for the UFC. $14.95, and that literally changed my life. I really remember that night. I can even remember the day leading up to that night, and hooked ever since.
I kind of want to pick apart a few questions out of that. So you talked about people who are talented and never quite, like you said, get some of the same gigs you have or better.
Absolutely.
And then you have people the opposite who aren't quite as talented and they get the most amazing gigs ever. What do you think attributes to that, and what do you think attributes to why you have gotten the gigs that you've gotten?
I'm very persistent. I think in fighters' terms, I'm probably a grinder. I'm extremely persistent. Definitely people are more talented than me. Definitely people have a better voice than me. I don't know that I've met anybody who has my level of preparation, and I think that's something that you can control as a commentator. You can't really control your talent. You can refine what you have and you can get better. You can't really control your talent. Some people are just more naturally talented than others, and I accept that. Voice is the same way. I'm fortunate, I think, in broadcasting. People like an accent that comes from my part of the country. I mean, if you look even historically, like Johnny Carson is from Nebraska, David Letterman is from Indiana. It's called General American, or it used to be the accent. And people can play with their accents, but whatever. There are people with much, much better voices than me. But the one thing I can control is my work rate and my effort and my level of preparation. And I know that that's definitely helped me in my career. And I absolutely love this. I commentate combat sports because I'm a massive combat sports fan. I never wanted to be that general all sports commentator. No disrespect to the sports I'm going to name, but like you see me on the women's volleyball, and then you see me on the bowling, and then there I am on the bull riding, there I am on the golf, because I don't know anything about those sports, and I feel like I would be disrespecting those sports. And when I've seen people come into combat sports, be it MMA, be it boxing, whatever, and I know that they're not fans, I feel like they're really disrespecting our sports. And I never want someone to have that impression of me of another way, because I don't know anything about golf. I'm not a golf fan, but there are a lot of people who are. And not that anyone's ever asked me to commentate golf, but if they did, I would say thank you very much, but no, because I don't want to disrespect that sport. I don't know anything about that. I really, really love combat sports. I hope my passion shows through, and I hope that my preparation shows through.
Hip fire question, only because you brought it up. Favorite pro wrestling commentator?
Oh, Gordon Soley, without a doubt. So we had cable television, and we had the old, and this is really dating it, it was WTCG before it was WTBS, before it became TBS. And now with Turner, Ted Turner gone, I don't know what it's going to be called, but the old WTCG, which was Atlanta Superstation. And we had two superstations on my cable system. We had WGN out of Chicago, we had WTCG out of Atlanta. And from 5:05 to 7:05 every Saturday night, I don't know why it was 5:05 to 7:05, but from 5:05 to 7:05, it was Georgia Championship Wrestling with Gordon Soley. And I loved it. It was cool. I was such a pro wrestling fan. So we had Central States, and that was every single Thursday night, 52 weeks a year for years and years at Memorial Hall. And then they would do a cut down of every other week, and that was from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Channel 41 when it was a UHF station. It's now an NBC affiliate in Kansas City. It was a UHF. A lot of people are saying, what's UHF? But a UHF affiliate. So we had that on Sunday mornings. We had the 2-hour block on cable from the Superstation in Atlanta. And then we would get these great WWF cards from Madison Square Garden, and occasionally the Cap Center in Landover, Maryland. So I got to see a lot of pro wrestling as a kid, in person and on television, and I loved it. Loved Jesse Ventura. I've had a chance to meet Jesse a few times. Loved the late, great Gorilla Monsoon. Jim Ross, not only one of my heroes in the business, I'm proud to call him a friend. We've commentated boxing together. We commentated a crazy show in Phoenix 3 years ago called Your Fights, which had pro wrestling. Shannon the Cannon Rich actually fought on that in MMA against Maverick Harvey. Roy Jones Jr. fought Byron Phillips in boxing. Worked with Jim Ross. Jim Ross is one of my heroes. But Gordon Soley, because I was so young and so impressionable, he was it for me, man. Absolutely.
Not, you don't have to pick the promotion because that could get political, but what is your favorite sport to commentate?
MMA. It really is. I'm commentating the Roy Jones Jr. boxing series on Fight Pass, and I can honestly say I've never enjoyed working for an organization more. It's Roy, it's Keith Veltri, Keith's wife Lisa. I've never been treated so well. And I told them that on our last show, which was a week ago in San Antonio, Texas. I was like, I've never been treated better. Early on in Bellator, in the Bjorn Rebney days, I was treated beautifully. Later on, not so much. They treated me really well in Pride. Other groups have taken really nice care of me. Victory Fighting Championship, which is now gone, Ryan Stoddard took really good care of me. But the Roy Jones Jr. series takes great care of me. I love that. Saying that MMA is so fun to commentate. One, I'm a huge grappling guy, so the intricacies of that, and there's always so much in little things that you can look at. And as a commentator, that you have to be knowledgeable on grappling, you have to be knowledgeable on wrestling, you have to understand kicks, you have to understand punches, you have to understand range. It's a lot. I wouldn't say it's a challenge, because that almost has a negative connotation as a commentator. It's a pleasure, because there are so many different elements. Calling boxing is so much fun. I do World Lightweight Championship, that's a blast. I really enjoyed when I did Quintet on submission grappling. I hope I get to do a lot more submission grappling shows, being Quintet or Chael Sonnen's group or whomever. But there's something about MMA. It's my favorite sport by far. And just it's my favorite sport to commentate, just because it's so complex. The little things in MMA turn out to be the big things, and that's what I really love.
Obviously, you got a big week ahead of you. Obviously, with M1 Global, which we're at now. Then you got BKFC number 5 in Biloxi, Mississippi, which you're also the commentator there. What are maybe some dark horse fights, or maybe even fights in particular that you're looking forward to? We don't have time to go over the whole cards, but
Sure.
maybe like one from each of the cards that you're in particular looking forward to.
Well, I'm on this card. What I'm really looking forward to, like Travis View, I love, and we were in Bellator together. Dakota Cochran, he had 2 fights in Bellator when I was there, and I commentated in Victory. And I live in Kansas City. He lives in Omaha, which is a 2-hour, 45-minute drive. So there's a lot of cross-pollination in the MMA community between those 2 cities. Dakota's one of my favorite guys. I've known him a long time, fighting James Warfield. But Shannon the Cannon Rich versus Travis Fulton, I love. Now, I've commentated Shannon. I know Travis really well. I've never actually commentated Travis. Travis is number 1 all time. And I did some nice checking. I called my guys, Carrick Janess at MMAfighting.com. Checked on that. I checked Tapology. I was cross-referencing SureDog. And it's come out for sure that for documented fights, I know everyone says they were 500-0 in underground fights, fine. But for documented fights that people can actually verify, number 1 all time in fights total as a pro MMA fighter is Travis Fulton. Number 2 is Shannon Rich. Number 3 is Dan Severn. Number 4 is Jeremy Horn. Number 5 is Ikehisa Minowa. And to commentate this fight, Travis Fulton, who, by the way, is only 41 years old. He's not 102 like people think, only 41, against Shannon Rich. That's super cool, man. You think about it, in the entire history of MMA, 25 and a half years we've gone on this sport dating back to UFC 1, number 1 and number 2 all time in fights are going to be in a bout that I'm commentating. I love that. Bare knuckle, that's something I'm in love with. Now, I've been putting over Roy Jones Jr. boxing. I will tell you that the fight card that I enjoyed commentating the most last year was BKFC 1, June 2nd of 2018 in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I've done 4 now. We're coming up on 5. 2 days after we do this show for M1 Global USA on Fight Pass, that I'll be doing on pay-per-view BKFC 5. I love bare knuckle. There's a rawness and an energy and even a camaraderie to it that the closest I can come to it is what Art Davie told me about the early UFCs. And everything that Art told me and what I know about UFC 1 being there in Denver in that second week in November of 1993, I felt like we encapsulated being in Cheyenne, Wyoming in that first week in June in 2018. Fighters literally off to the side, opponents even like, whoa, have you been doing this? And what if I hit you here? Not in a worked fashion, because believe me, there were absolutely no works. This was straight up, but it was sharing knowledge. It was unknown. Art Davie said, and it's actually in our book, Is This Legal? He said that he told the fighters, you guys are like those test pilots, in the early space program. You don't really know what you're getting yourselves into. You have a lot of knowledge, but you're kind of going out of your comfort zone. That's what I felt like bare knuckle was on BKFC 1. It still is on BKFC 5. The fact that Paulie Malignaggi is going to be fighting, I think, at BKFC 6. He's going to be sitting and commentating with Antonio Tarver and myself on our main event, the Jason Knight Artem Lobov fight. Paulie Malignaggi, phenomenal fighter, world champion, but he doesn't quite know what he's getting himself into, just like the early fighters, even the really accomplished fighters, didn't quite know what they were getting themselves into when they signed a contract with Art Davie for the UFC. I adore bare knuckle. I'm of the opinion it is the safest of the combat sports that actually involve striking. For the simple fact that you cannot repeatedly punch somebody in the head or you're going to break your hand. Bobby Gunn, who is the absolute king of bare knuckle, he knows more about bare knuckle fighting than any living human being on the planet. Talks about things like punching here, punching a lot of the targets that you would never think to do in MMA or Muay Thai or Letway or kickboxing or boxing. It's totally different on bare knuckle. And you go back and you watch Bobby Gunn, you see his fight at BKFC 1, where it wasn't much opposition. I mean, he rolled through his opponent. But you look at some of his underground fights, how few headshots he actually throws. And Bobby says that he never throws more than 40%. It's so new, it's so raw. I'll give Dave Feldman, the head of BKFC and the person who brought BKFC into the 21st century from the 19th century, credit. He created a rule set, much like Art Davie did 25 and a half years ago with UFC, where it's an open playing field. If it was just about boxing rules in bare knuckles, the boxing guys are going to roll through the MMA guys. If you allowed standing submissions or takedowns, the MMA guys are going to roll through the boxing guys. But because you can underhook, you can overhook, you can half plumb, you can waist cinch and still punch with your other hand free, it's leveled the playing field. So the boxers and the MMA fighters really have an equal chance. And we're seeing boxers like Sam Shoemaker and Reggie Barnett Jr. beating MMA guys, and we're seeing MMA fighters like Joe Diesel Riggs and Chris Lytle and Beck Rawlings beating boxing athletes. And I find that really amazing. I am completely in love, absolutely smitten with bare knuckle. I'm convinced it is the next major combat sport. And I find it really interesting. If you look at the trajectory, the arc of acceptance of MMA, BKFC is doing the exact same thing. Look, where were the early UFCs, right? Art started in Denver, Colorado, but he was in Wyoming, he was in Mississippi, he was in Alabama. Now you look at bare knuckle, we start in Wyoming, we're going to Mississippi. Alabama is very close to approving. In the 90s, you had people talking about it being barbaric and human cockfighting, and this sport is a disgrace and we'll never allow it. Now look where MMA is, and I think we're seeing the exact same thing with bare knuckle. People often fear what they don't know. That's what happened with MMA, and I think that's what's happening with bare knuckle. People get past it, they understand the rationale, the science, the medical reasoning behind it, then they come to acceptance.
Kind of play off that, because it just happened, it's pretty relevant. Do you feel that the antics, like, with the Pauline Artem thing and stuff like that, it's nothing new, with
Right.
Conor McGregor's and even like Chael Sonnen,
Right.
the trash talking antics. Do you think that maybe it's a little too? I want to use the words WWE, and I don't mean by stage or nothing like
Right.
that. What I mean is more like over the top. I don't mean stage, but more or less over the top. Do you feel that it does more bad than good? Do you think it's the right amount?
No, I think I think it's the right amount for one, because you have somebody extremely respected like Paulie Malignaggi and extremely respected like Artem Lobov. So these are known and highly accomplished fighters and combat sports athletes. So a lot of people have been asking me, was that worked? I was on a conference call they were talking about with Dave Feldman and the PR team about that press conference. Nobody told me anything about a work. I think that was straight up a shoot on what happened. This is what I know. A lot of people have been talking about bare knuckle because of what happened with Paulie Malignaggi and Artem Lobov. And if it's getting attention to a sport that I love and a promotion I love that I think needs more attention, and the media is a little slow, especially the boxing media. The MMA media has been great. The boxing media has been really slow. If that's what it takes, even though maybe that wasn't the intent, I don't think that was the intent. I think it was organic and it happened. But if that's what it takes to get people to pay attention, then that's fine with me. Whatever brings them to the party. I feel like with bare knuckle, if you're really a fight person, regardless of your combat sport, if you're really a fight person and you keep an open mind, you're going to love bare knuckle. And I would have said that if you had interviewed me 24 or 25 years ago on MMA. I said, if you're a fight person, this sport, and we probably would have called it NHB or Ultimate Fighting, this sport, keep an open mind and you're going to fall in love with it. There's no question about that.
Just in my 2 cents, and would you say that when it came to bare knuckle, so when it came to like regular boxing, I was, 5-6 years ago, I was kind of a casual boxing fan. The hardcore MMA fan, but boxing, I watched the bigger fights, But I got turned on the bare knuckle about 6 months ago.
Right.
And wait a minute, this is exciting. This is fast paced. This isn't the same as regular boxing. It keeps the action going. With the rule set,
absolutely.
It's made to keep the action
Oh,
going.
there's no doubt.
Would you say that it's a very good middle ground to grab those MMA fans who kind of want a taste of boxing?
Absolutely.
But it's not quite, like you said,
Yeah.
it's built for action.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a perfect middle ground for MMA fans to cross over?
I think it's a perfect middle ground for MMA fans and boxing fans. Unfortunately, boxing fans, by and large, it's tough to generalize, but I'm going to do this right here anyway. Boxing fans, by and large, have been slower to embrace bare knuckle than have MMA fans. MMA fans, for whatever reason, seem a little more open-minded to it. I think it's the perfect middle ground between both sports. If you look at the media coverage in the combat sports media, it's largely been the MMA group that has embraced it. I don't know why boxing maybe seems a little more tied up in the tradition, but I would say if you're really a traditionalist in boxing, look at where boxing came from. If you're a fan of the Marquess of Queensberry rules, then you should know the London Prize Ring rules, you should know the Broughton rules. You should know historically, if you're really this boxing purist, that the reason that gloves were brought into it was not for fighter safety, it was because the fights were going on too long and people thought it was boring and they wanted more knockouts and quicker fights. That's the historic reason for glove boxing. So maybe keep an open mind to bare knuckle, and if you really do, you're probably going to fall in love with this sport if you are a true fight person.
Well, Mr. Wheelock, we don't want to keep it too much longer, man, but it's awesome talking to you. We're definitely going to have to do it again because your wealth of knowledge is just, man, it's going to take 2 or 3 interviews to kind of get through it.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you. No, you guys are great, and you know what? The coverage that you've given, you guys are such a nice supporter of mine, and that means a lot to me with bare knuckle, with what we're doing with M1 Global USA and MMA, and all the work you do. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
100%. M1 Global, catch on UFC Fight Pass tomorrow night. BKFC number 5, catch it Saturday, pay-per-view, Fight TV. Don't miss either one, you'll be sorry. Mr. Wheelock, best commentator in my opinion.
Thank you.
Going right now. We're Combat Insiders, and we're out.